Having a hobby is a wonderful thing, but when you can use your skills to bring a bit of comfort to friends and family during a difficult time, it becomes an amazing thing. My friend Sarah passed away in June. Her parents planted a memorial garden for her at their church. I offered to build a sign for the garden to dedicate it to her. I've never carved a sign before, but I decided to learn a new skill. I sketched out some ideas that I shared with them, and we came up with a final design. I found some very punky eastern red cedar for a good price. Sarah's favorite color was pink. Between that and the hardiness of cedar when used outdoors, it was the perfect wood. I cut it down to final size and flattened it using my jointer and planer. We had settled on a shape that featured scalloped edges, so I marked the radius on the edges of the piece and cut them out on the bandsaw. The cuts came out a little dirty because I'm still learning how to use my bandsaw. I wrapped a piece of sandpaper around a dowel to smooth them out. For the edge profile, I used a 1/2-inch cove bit. I did this in 2 passes to ensure a clean cut. For the frame, we chose to use a simple design of 2 legs and a horizontal crosspiece. I found a suitably sized section of the slab that was clear of any defects, and set about milling it down to size. I felt the 1.25-inch thick slab would be too bulky for the frame, so I decided to resaw it into 2 smaller pieces. After planing away the bandsaw marks, each piece ended up just over a 1/2-inch thick. This curve template was left over from the pergola I built last summer. I used it with a flush trim bit to create some gentle curves at the tops of the legs and the sides of the crosspiece. I guess you could call the joint I used a sort of half bridle joint. There's probably a better name for it than that, but it seemed to be the best way to join the legs to the crosspiece. I did a whole bunch of test cuts on scrap using handsaw and chisels, but I couldn't ever get it right. On a whim, I tried cutting it on the bandsaw and discovered that I got a much better result. Actually, a perfect fit on the first try. The first cut was used to transfer marks to the second leg. The sign itself is going to hang from the crosspiece using some small pieces of chain. I drilled pilot holes for the eye screws that would be used to hang the sign. I had no idea how much chain I would actually need to get the sign hanging the way I wanted, but it turned out that it was a lot less than I initially expected. I ended up only needing a single link and a pair of S-hooks between each of the eye screws. A hacksaw quickly freed up the single links that were needed. After deciding on a font for the text of the sign, I used a glue stick to attach the template to the front of the workpiece. My initial plan had been to use a router to carve the letters, but at this point I realized that wasn't going to work because they were too small. I decided to try chip carving. The curved gouge from Harbor Freight that I bought was barely passable, but my decently sharp chisel worked pretty well on the straighter letters. The entire process took me just over an hour. While I'm carving, let me tell you a little bit about Sarah. Though she was born with disabilities and was not capable of living independently, she had an extremely sharp sense of humor and did live a very full life. Her love of bright colors, both in fashion and her artwork, was matched by her colorful personality. Much credit goes to her loving parents and brother for helping her experience many things that more fortunate people may not ever get the chance to, but some of that credit goes to a local organization called Life's Work. Through participation in this organization, Sarah was able to do things like go camping, be a cheerleader, and many other activities that would not have otherwise been possible without their support. If you're enjoying or learning anything from this video, please consider donating to them or a similar organization near you so that other people like Sarah can benefit from their services. I'll leave a link to their website in the description of this video. Once the carving was done, I ripped off as much of the template as I could and cleaned up the rest with a card scraper. I sanded all the way to 220 grit to remove any remaining bits of the template and clean up the frame before I assembled it using Titebond 3 and a pair of clamps. I had some leftover interior paint in the desired color, so I used that to detail the inside of the letters. This worked okay, but I later used acrylic on a second sign, and that worked a lot better. I wasn't sure how well some of the bleeding paint would clean up, so I tried to wipe it as I went, but this was unnecessary. Sanding the surface after painting left the very nice and clean lines for the letters. The sign and frame were finished with 3 coats of Minwax Helmsman spar urethane in satin finish, following the directions on the can. I am extremely pleased with how this sign came out. The wood is beautiful, the size is perfect, and Sarah's parents were thrilled by the final product. I kinda wish the red in the sign stood out a little bit more, but it looks pretty good. In all fairness, it was a cloudy day when I took the final photos, so I'm sure it's fine when it's sunny. Once again, I'd really appreciate it if you would consider taking time to support the Life's Work organization or your local support organizations for people with developmental disabilities. If you've enjoyed this video, please come check out some of my other videos or subscribe to my channel. You can also see what I'm working on next on my Instagram page. Thanks very much for staying with me to the end.